The soft amber glow from the chandelier above reflected faintly in Sarah's wide, anxious eyes as she traced the elegant script on the menu before her. Her delicate fingers, usually calloused from hours of cleaning, trembled almost imperceptibly as she turned the heavy, embossed page. A single, crumpled $3 bill lay discreetly tucked beneath the edge of her plate, a stark, unwelcome reminder of her precarious financial reality. The opulent surroundings of the Gilded Spoon, a restaurant far removed from her everyday world, seemed to mock her, its hushed luxury amplifying the thumping anxiety in her chest. Every polished surface, every gleaming utensil, every murmur of refined conversation from neighboring tables felt like a judgment. Sarah was a name synonymous with quiet resilience, a young woman whose spirit had been forged in the crucible of necessity. In a bustling American metropolis, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and dreams were often bought at a steep price, Sarah carved out a humble existence in a tiny, sparsely furnished apartment. Her days were a relentless cycle of scrubbing, polishing, and tidying, her nimble hands transforming countless strangers' homes into pristine sanctuaries. She was a maid, yes, but she carried herself with an innate dignity, her kindness a beacon in a world often too quick to overlook those on its fringes. Every dollar she earned, every painful penny, was meticulously saved, a significant portion wired back home to her ailing mother, whose medical bills loomed like an ever-present shadow over their lives. This evening, however, was meant to be an escape, a rare foray into a semblance of normalcy, perhaps even a touch of romance. Tom, a kind and affable acquaintance from a community college art class she attended sporadically between shifts, had finally worked up the courage to ask her out. Sarah, starved for genuine connection and a moment of reprieve from her ceaseless toil, had eagerly accepted. The anticipation had bubbled within her for days, a fragile hope that this evening might be different, a chance to simply be Sarah, not just the diligent maid or the dutiful daughter. She had spent a precious hour selecting her modest but clean dress, the one that made her eyes sparkle just a little brighter, and had applied a touch of lipstick, a rare indulgence. But now, sitting across from Tom, whose easy smile and enthusiastic chatter about his day were a stark contrast to her internal turmoil, the reality of her situation had crashed down with brutal force. The Gilded Spoon was not just expensive, it was astronomically so. The prices listed on the menu were not merely numbers. They were declarations of a world entirely separate from hers, a world where entrees cost more than a day's wages, where appetizers were a week's grocery budget. Her heart sank, a leaden weight in her stomach. She scanned the elaborate descriptions, each one more daunting than the last, her gaze darting frantically from seared scallops with saffron risotto to pan-roasted duck with cherry reduction. Then finally, desperately, to the beverages section, hoping for some miraculous, affordable option. The $3, her entire allocated budget for this precious, potentially life-changing evening, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. How could she possibly order anything? The shame welled up, hot and acrid, threatening to overwhelm her. She imagined Tom's polite confusion, then his inevitable disappointment, his judgment, when he realized she couldn't afford a single item on the menu. The thought of appearing poor, of exposing her financial vulnerability, was almost unbearable. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the fear of being seen as less, of her humble background overshadowing who she truly was. She wanted Tom to see her, Sarah, the woman who loved art and dreamed of a better future, not Sarah, the struggling maid with $3 in her purse. She felt a burning desire to disappear, to simply vanish from the luxurious confines of the restaurant, swallowed whole by the plush velvet banquettes. Tom, oblivious to her inner turmoil, leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. "So, anything catch your eye, Sarah? I'm thinking the Wagyu steak, if I'm feeling adventurous." He chuckled, his gaze briefly flashing over the menu before returning to her. Sarah forced a smile, her throat tight. "Oh, everything looks wonderful, Tom," she managed, her voice a little too high, a little too breathless. She silently cursed herself for not researching the restaurant beforehand, for allowing herself to be carried away by the simple joy of being asked out. Now, here she was, trapped, facing the humiliating prospect of confessing her impecuniousness, or worse, fabricating some elaborate excuse. The sheer impossibility of the situation pressed in on her from all sides. Her mind raced, desperately searching for a solution, any solution, that would allow her to salvage this date, this fragile seed of hope. She just wanted to enjoy the evening, to laugh and talk without the constant, gnawing worry of financial inadequacy. But with every passing second, the gap between her reality and the restaurant's grandeur seemed to widen, threatening to swallow her whole. The weight of the $3 resting beneath her plate felt heavier than any burden she had ever carried. As Sarah sat there, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, wrestling with the overwhelming discomfort of her predicament. You might be wondering how she'll navigate this delicate situation. Before we delve deeper into Sarah's challenging evening, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with more compelling stories like this one. It helps us bring you more tales of unexpected kindness and human resilience. Sarah's fingers traced the elegant script of the menu, each word a potential landmine. Her breath hitched with every lavish description, her eyes darting frantically across the page, searching for a single affordable item. The prices, column after column, seemed to mock her, soaring beyond the paltry sum clutched in her hand. A wave of heat washed over her cheeks, even as the restaurant's air conditioning chilled the exposed skin of her arms. She tried to appear nonchalant, her gaze lingering on the appetizers, then the salads, then the main courses, as if genuinely weighing her options. But her mind was a whirlwind of calculations and desperate strategies. How could she possibly order something that wouldn't expose her predicament? Tom, seated opposite her, was radiating an easy charm, completely absorbed in the moment. He smiled, a genuine open smile that made her heart ache with a mixture of affection and acute embarrassment. "Everything looks amazing, doesn't it?" he enthused, his eyes sparkling as he gestured vaguely at the menu. "I'm thinking the pan-seared scallops, or maybe the prime rib. What are you leaning towards, Sarah?" His question hung in the air, weighted with expectation. Sarah forced a brittle smile, her voice a little too high-pitched. "Oh, definitely. It all sounds delightful. Just taking my time deciding. So many wonderful choices." She paused, trying to inject some normalcy into her tone. "How was your day, Tom? Anything exciting happen at work?" She hoped to distract him, to buy herself precious minutes to concoct a plan, any plan that would spare her the humiliation. But her mind reeled, her focus entirely consumed by the looming financial cliff. The soft clinking of silverware, the low hum of conversation from other tables, the gentle melody drifting from a hidden speaker. It all blurred into an oppressive soundtrack to her growing despair. The antagonist truly wasn't a person in this scene, but the crushing weight of societal expectation, the invisible barrier money frequently erected between people. This luxurious restaurant, with its polished mahogany, soft lighting, and impeccably dressed clientele, felt less like a welcoming space and more like an opulent cage designed to highlight her inadequacy. Each perfectly coiffed head, every confident laugh, every clink of expensive wine glasses seemed to underscore her own humble reality. Sarah imagined their lives, effortlessly navigating such establishments, never once glancing at the right-hand column of a menu with a knot of dread in their stomachs. Her self-consciousness, a constant companion in these rare forays beyond her everyday world, intensified to an almost unbearable degree. It wasn't just about the $3. It was about the fear of being seen, truly seen, as poor, as an outsider in a world she barely touched. She considered several desperate attempts at resolution. Could she feign a sudden, debilitating headache and suggest leaving? "Oh, Tom, I suddenly feel a bit unwell. Perhaps we could get a quick bite somewhere else, another time." But the thought of disappointing him, of cutting short what was meant to be a special evening, twisted her stomach. He had seemed so excited for this date, for their time together. Her desire to make a good impression, to show him she was capable and pleasant company, warred fiercely with the instinct to flee. Perhaps she could order something so small, so inconspicuous, that he wouldn't notice its cost. A simple side salad, maybe, or a bowl of soup, hoping it would be surprisingly hearty. But then what? Would she sip slowly, trying to stretch a few bites into a full meal, while he savored a lavish dish? The thought sent a fresh wave of shame through her. She imagined the waiter's knowing glance, the subtle judgment, the unspoken understanding that she was out of place. It was a ridiculous situation, she knew, yet the panic was undeniably real. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to find an escape, a way to preserve her dignity. Her eyes frantically scanned the menu again, this time with surgical precision, dissecting each category. Starters, soups, salads, mains, desserts. There had to be something. A flicker of hope ignited when she spotted a side order section, buried almost as an afterthought. Seasonal vegetable medley, $8. Still too much. Roasted asparagus, $9. No, garlic mashed potatoes, $7. Even a side was exorbitant. She swallowed hard, her mouth dry. Her gaze finally landed on the bottom of the soup section, almost hidden. Soup du jour, cup $5. A cup, $5. Even that was beyond her budget unless she planned to order nothing else. She felt a profound wave of defeat wash over her. A cup of soup would still mean she was short $2. She couldn't even afford the cheapest item on the menu. The irony was brutal, searing. Here she was, trying to build a connection, a potential future, and she couldn't even afford a basic meal. The lavish setting felt less romantic and more like a cruel spotlight, illuminating her every insecurity. She took a slow, deep breath, trying to calm the frantic beating of her heart, knowing that somehow she had to find a solution, and find it quickly, before Tom noticed her distress. The waiter was approaching, a notepad in hand, and time was running out. Sarah managed a tight, forced smile as the waiter approached, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. With as much casualness as she could muster, she pointed to the least expensive item on the menu, a simple salad, barely more than a garnish, carefully avoiding Tom's gaze. "I'll just have this, please," she murmured, her voice sounding unnaturally thin even to her own ears. Tom, meanwhile, completely oblivious to the silent battle raging within her, enthusiastically ordered a rich multi-course meal, detailing his preferences with a relaxed confidence that was both admirable and, to Sarah, utterly terrifying in its contrast to her own predicament. He spoke of wine pairings and dessert options, painting a picture of an evening of indulgent enjoyment, while Sarah mentally calculated how many hours she would need to work to cover even a fraction of what his meal would cost. The waiter, a professional with years of experience navigating the unspoken dynamics of the restaurant's affluent clientele, took their orders with practiced ease. However, as he turned from their table, his eyes lingered on Sarah for just a fraction of a second longer than on Tom, a subtle, almost imperceptible glance of pity flickering within their depths. It was a look Sarah recognized, a quiet acknowledgement of the disparity that embarrassed her deeply, even though she knew he meant no harm. It was the same look she sometimes received from delivery drivers when they arrived at her small, unassuming apartment building compared to the grand residences of her clients. Unbeknownst to Sarah, her quiet struggle had not gone entirely unnoticed. At a nearby, exquisitely set table, bathed in the warm glow of an ornate chandelier, sat Michael. He was the progeny of a billionaire software mogul, a young man who moved through the world with an air of quiet authority, his sharp, intelligent eyes missing little. Tonight, he was having dinner with a few business associates, their conversation a low hum of market trends and technological innovations. Michael, however, possessed a peculiar talent for observation, a keen understanding of human behavior honed by years of navigating the complex social strata of extreme wealth. He was accustomed to the performative nature of his world, the careful curation of appearances, the subtle power plays enacted over expensive dinners. But as his gaze drifted across the opulent dining room, it snagged on Sarah. He had noticed her the moment she arrived with Tom. Her initial hesitation at the entrance, the way her shoulders seemed to subtly tense as she took in the lavish surroundings. Then, he watched her discreetly unfold the menu, her head bowed slightly, her brow furrowed in concentration that seemed too intense for merely choosing a meal. He saw her slender fingers tap almost imperceptibly against the small, crumpled $3 bill that lay slightly concealed beneath her napkin, a stark visual anomaly against the pristine white tablecloth. He noted the way her eyes darted across the price columns, not with curiosity, but with a palpable sense of anxiety. Her attempt to appear composed was valiant, but to Michael's discerning eye, it was a thin veil. Michael, surrounded by the predictable displays of success and ambition, found himself intrigued by this unexpected tableau. He was accustomed to people performing for him, for his name, for his family's influence. But Sarah's discomfort was genuine, uncalculating. It was a raw, unvarnished emotion that stood in stark contrast to the polished facades he encountered daily. He saw the genuine worry etched around her eyes, the subtle clench of her jaw, the way she clutched her small purse. It was a silent, desperate dance between wanting to belong and the harsh reality of her circumstance. He watched her order the salad, the barely there whisper of her voice, and saw the flicker of pity in the waiter's eyes, a flicker that confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't merely a woman on a date. This was a woman navigating a social minefield with grace and quiet dignity. He sensed a deeper struggle, a struggle for pride and respect in a world that often valued only outward displays of wealth. Michael, despite his immense privilege, felt a surprising pang of recognition. He, too, had often felt like an outsider, albeit for vastly different reasons. The weight of expectation, the constant scrutiny, the isolation that often accompanied his family's status. He understood the desire to blend in, to not draw attention to one's differences, even if those differences were of an entirely different nature. He saw beyond the surface glamour of the restaurant, past the expensive clothes and the clinking of crystal, and recognized a rare authenticity in Sarah's quiet desperation. It was a stark contrast to the usual pretenses, the carefully constructed personas he encountered in his world. and it held his attention captive. The petite dish finally arrived at Sarah's table, a garnish of rocket leaves barely covering a few artfully arranged cherry tomatoes and a drizzle of balsamic glaze. It looked more like an appetizer sample than a main course, a culinary whisper in a room of booming entrees. Tom, engrossed in recounting an amusing anecdote about his office pet, paused mid-sentence as the waiter placed the almost comically small plate before Sarah. His brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Is that all you ordered, Sarah?" he asked, his voice laced with an innocent surprise that pierced her already fragile composure. He hadn't meant it unkindly, but the question landed like a stone in her stomach, amplifying the shame she had fought so hard to conceal. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Her cheeks flushed crimson, and she felt a prickle of tears behind her eyes. She forced a brittle smile, trying desperately to inject a casualness she didn't feel into her voice. "Oh, yes. I'm not terribly hungry tonight, you know. Just a light bite. Plus, I had a late lunch, so this is perfect." Her words tumbled out, a flimsy attempt to construct a believable lie, but even to her own ears, they sounded hollow and unconvincing. She picked up her fork, stirring the few leaves around the plate, a theatrical display of contentment she hoped would fool him. The very act of pretending to enjoy her minuscule meal felt like a betrayal of her own dignity. Each movement was deliberate, calculated to project an image of effortless grace, while internally she was screaming. The restaurant's opulent atmosphere, once merely intimidating, now felt like a spotlight illuminating her inadequacy. Every glance from a passing diner, every clink of silverware from a neighboring table, seemed to magnify her predicament. Michael, at his distant table, continued his silent vigil. He watched Sarah's carefully constructed performance, the forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the way her shoulders seemed to slump imperceptibly after Tom's innocent query. He noticed the subtle tremor in her hand as she lifted her fork, the almost imperceptible flinch when a waiter inadvertently brushed past her chair. He saw the genuine embarrassment bloom across her features, a raw vulnerability that struck him deeply. It was a stark reminder of the social chasm that often separated people, not just in terms of wealth, but in their intrinsic worth and dignity. He detected the deep-seated pride she held, the invisible armor she wore to protect herself from judgment. He recognized the quiet struggle, the silent battle being fought within her, and his initial intrigue deepened into a profound sense of empathy. This wasn't about a lack of money. It was about the humiliation of being exposed, of feeling less than, in a world that constantly demanded more. He had witnessed countless displays of wealth and power, of individuals flaunting their success, and equally, he had observed the subtle condescension often directed towards those perceived as less fortunate. But in Sarah, he saw none of the bitterness, none of the resentment he often encountered. Only a quiet, dignified struggle to maintain her composure, to preserve her self-respect in the face of what must have felt like overwhelming odds. Her attempt to hide her discomfort, to shield Tom from the stark reality of her situation, spoke volumes to him. It was a testament to her character, to her gentle nature, and to a resilience that resonated with something deep within him. It was a humility and honesty he rarely encountered in his rarefied existence, a refreshing contrast to the often insincere interactions that populated his everyday life. He saw a person, not a stereotype, and that realization stirred a nascent desire to act. His gaze lingered on the lone $3 bill, still peeking out from under her napkin, a pathetic symbol of her limited resources against the backdrop of the restaurant's exorbitant prices. It was a detail that spoke volumes, a tiny yet powerful testament to her reality. He considered the options, weighing how to intervene without causing further embarrassment. He didn't want to draw attention to her, to inadvertently exacerbate her discomfort. The act had to be subtle, anonymous, a quiet gesture that would alleviate her immediate distress without revealing its source. He wanted to offer a moment of reprieve, a small oasis of kindness in what was clearly a challenging evening for her. He imagined what it must feel like to be in her shoes, to navigate such a situation with grace, and his admiration for her quiet strength grew. Without a single word, without breaking his composed demeanor, or even glancing directly at Sarah's table, Michael discreetly caught the eye of his own waiter, a seasoned professional named Arthur who had served the restaurant's elite for decades. Arthur, accustomed to Michael's subtle cues and silent instructions, approached his table with a deferential posture. As he leaned in, Michael lowered his voice, almost to a whisper, his eyes briefly flicking towards Sarah's table before returning to meet Arthur's with an unwavering intensity. He spoke clearly, concisely, giving a specific instruction that left no room for misinterpretation. Arthur, a man who understood the unspoken language of his wealthy patrons, nodded once, a barely perceptible acknowledgement that affirmed his comprehension, and then quietly melted away, disappearing into the bustling rhythm of the kitchen. The seed of Michael's intervention had been sown, a silent act of generosity orchestrated with the precision of a seasoned strategist, yet driven by an unexpected surge of compassion. The small, almost imperceptible nod Michael gave his waiter, a silent directive understood only between them, set in motion a chain of events that would swiftly alter Sarah's evening. Sarah had just taken a tentative, almost apologetic bite of her meager side salad, trying to savor the few leaves of lettuce as if they were the most exquisite delicacy. Tom, engrossed in his own robust plate of pasta, hadn't even looked up, still detailing his ambitious plans for a hypothetical startup. The tension in Sarah's shoulders remained, a constant hum of anxiety beneath her forced smile. She wished the ground would swallow her whole, making her disappear from this elegant, unforgiving restaurant, where every detail screamed a life she couldn't afford. She had hoped the salad would be enough to get her through, to keep her pride intact, but her stomach rumbled a quiet protest, underscoring the inadequacy of her choice. And then it happened. A new waiter, one she hadn't seen before, approached their table with a flourish, carrying a silver cloche. He moved with an almost theatrical grace, his expression neutral, but his posture conveying a sense of importance. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She exchanged a quick, bewildered glance with Tom, who finally paused his soliloquy, looking up with genuine curiosity. The waiter paused beside Sarah's chair, then with a practiced flick of his wrist, lifted the cloche to reveal a breathtaking dish. Perfectly seared scallops resting on a bed of vibrant saffron risotto, adorned with delicate microgreens and a drizzle of balsamic glaze. The rich aroma instantly filled their small space, a stark contrast to the simple vinaigrette scent of her salad. "A special from the chef, madame," the waiter stated smoothly, his voice low and professional, his eyes meeting hers with an almost imperceptible hint of kindness. He offered a small, polite bow before placing the plate directly in front of her, gently shifting her own half-eaten salad to make room. Sarah was utterly dumbfounded. Her mind raced, grappling with the sheer impossibility of the situation. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson, a wave of intense embarrassment washing over her. She tried to stammer out a protest, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh no, I think there's been a mistake. I didn't order this." She looked up at the waiter, a desperate plea in her eyes for him to understand, to rectify this awkward, mortifying error. Her entire being recoiled from the unexpected attention, the sudden spotlight on her. Her greatest fear, that of being exposed as an imposter in this grand setting, felt like it was materializing right before her eyes. The waiter, however, remained impassive, his smile unwavering. "No mistake, madame," the chef insisted. "Please enjoy." He gestured subtly to the exquisite plate, his stance indicating the matter was settled. There was a quiet finality in his tone, a subtle but firm refusal to allow her to argue. Tom, meanwhile, seemed utterly delighted by the unexpected turn of events. His eyes lit up, not with suspicion, but with genuine pleasure and perhaps a dash of pride, as if his own charm had somehow conjured this culinary miracle. "Wow, Sarah, look at this. Complimentary scallops. That's incredible. You must have made a real impression on the chef," he chuckled, completely oblivious to Sarah's internal turmoil. "Well, don't just sit there. Dig in. What a fantastic surprise." He gestured enthusiastically towards the dish, his eyes sparkling with amusement and satisfaction. He saw it as a delightful bonus, a testament to the restaurant's excellent service, completely unaware of the actual source of this spontaneous generosity. Sarah felt a complex swirl of emotions: relief, intense shame, and a burgeoning sense of confusion. The relief was primal. Her hunger, gnawing and persistent, suddenly had a luxurious answer. The shame, however, was overwhelming. She knew deep down that this was not a chef's random act of generosity. Restaurants, especially ones this fancy, didn't just give away their most expensive items. This was too specific, too perfectly timed. Someone had intervened. The thought burned her cheeks hotter than any blush of embarrassment. She felt like a charity case, exposed and vulnerable, despite the subtle nature of the gesture. Yet, Tom's enthusiastic encouragement, his complete ignorance of her real struggle, made it impossible for her to refuse without drawing even more unwanted attention. She couldn't explain her profound discomfort without revealing the very truth she had tried so hard to hide. She was trapped between accepting a kindness she didn't understand and risking further exposure. With a shaky hand, Sarah picked up her fork, her fingers trembling slightly as she cut into a succulent scallop. It was perfectly cooked, tender and flavorful, melting in her mouth. The risotto was creamy, rich, and altogether divine. Each bite was a contradiction, a taste of pure luxury mixed with the bitter tang of her own humiliation. She managed a weak, grateful smile at Tom, who was already back to describing his imaginary software empire, completely engrossed in his own world. Michael, from his table across the room, watched the entire exchange unfold. He saw Sarah's initial bewilderment, the flush on her face, her stammered refusal, and then her eventual, reluctant acceptance. He noted Tom's oblivious delight, the way he encouraged her without a hint of understanding. A small, knowing smile played on Michael's lips, a barely perceptible curve that spoke of quiet satisfaction. His act of kindness, carefully orchestrated and shielded from direct acknowledgement, had achieved its purpose. He had seen her struggle, he had understood, and he had acted. He didn't want gratitude. He just wanted to alleviate her obvious distress without further embarrassing her. The anonymity was crucial, ensuring that his gesture remained a private, almost magical intervention rather than a public display of charity. He took a sip of his wine, turning his attention back to his business associates, though his gaze occasionally drifted back towards Sarah, ensuring his little secret remained safe, and that she was finally enjoying a meal more fitting for the setting, and perhaps more fitting for her quiet dignity. The genuine pleasure of seeing her eat, finally relaxed, was its own reward. The unexpected plate of beautifully prepared scallops, glistening under the soft restaurant lights, sat before Sarah, an enigma she couldn't unravel. She ate slowly, savoring each delicate bite, the rich flavors a stark contrast to the small, meager salad she had initially ordered. A complex cocktail of gratitude, bewilderment, and lingering discomfort swirled within her. The food was undeniably luxurious, a temporary reprieve from her pressing financial worries, yet the mystery of its sudden appearance gnawed at her. She glanced around the room subtly, trying to divine who might have performed such an anonymous act of kindness, her eyes lingering longer on some tables than others, but no one seemed to be paying undue attention. The waiter had delivered it with such nonchalance, such an air of routine, as if bespoke dishes just magically materialized for patrons. Deep down, she knew this wasn't from the chef. Chefs don't randomly bestow their finest creations upon bewildered diners. Someone, somewhere in this opulent room, had orchestrated this delicate intervention. But who and why? The anonymity of the gesture, while appreciated, also created a strange sense of unease, a feeling of being observed, perhaps even pitied. It was a kindness that felt almost overwhelming, precisely because it was so undeserved, so unexpected. She wondered if she should have asked more questions, pressed the waiter for details, but her innate shyness and the desire to avoid a scene had kept her silent, accepting the gift with a forced, grateful smile. Tom, meanwhile, seemed utterly oblivious to Sarah's internal turmoil. He chatted animatedly about his day, his plans, his dreams, his voice a comforting drone against the background clatter of cutlery and hushed conversations. He seemed genuinely impressed by her graceful handling of the situation, the way she had accepted the chef's special with such quiet composure. He remarked on her pleasant demeanor, her calm resilience in the face of what he perceived as a slight mix-up. He saw her as charming, adaptable, and refreshingly unfazed by the unexpected. This evening, despite its awkward beginnings for Sarah, was solidifying his positive feelings for her. He admired her quiet strength, her ability to navigate surprising circumstances with such unpretentious grace. Her genuine enjoyment of the meal, now that it was before her, also pleased him. He found himself liking her even more, seeing beyond the initial apprehension she had displayed. Her humility, her understated elegance, even her initial attempt to economize, all contributed to an image of a woman of substance, far removed from the superficiality he often encountered. He felt a burgeoning admiration for her easygoing nature, her soft-spoken responses, and the genuine warmth that shone through her initial shyness. This was a woman who was real, he thought, a genuine soul, and that quality, above all, captivated him. He was falling slowly but surely for the authentic person he saw before him. Michael, from his table, continued to observe them, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. He watched Sarah as she ate, her earlier tension slowly melting away, replaced by a more relaxed, albeit still slightly puzzled expression. He saw the genuine, unforced smiles she now exchanged with Tom, the easy flow of their conversation. He noticed Tom's growing admiration, the way his eyes lingered on Sarah, reflecting a deepening connection. Michael was moved by Sarah's quiet dignity throughout the evening. She hadn't made a scene, hadn't complained, hadn't drawn attention to her predicament. She had faced her embarrassment with a stoic grace that resonated deeply with him. It was a quality he rarely saw, especially in the circles he frequented. Her resilience, her quiet determination, and her inherent goodness shone through, making a profound impression on him. He had intended his act to be a simple, anonymous kindness, a small alleviation of an immediate discomfort. Yet, as the evening progressed, as he witnessed the genuine connection forming between Sarah and Tom, fueled in part by his own subtle intervention, Michael found himself wanting to do more. It wasn't just about the meal anymore. He sensed a deeper struggle in Sarah, a life lived with constant financial strain, and he felt an uncommon urge to make a more significant difference. He had the means, undeniably, but it was the unexpected authenticity of Sarah that stirred within him a desire to extend his help beyond a single dinner. It was a rare feeling for him, this profound sense of connection to a stranger, this strong impulse to ease a burden far greater than a restaurant bill. He decided then, as he watched them laugh together, that he wanted to do more than just ensure a pleasant evening. He wanted to help her in a way that truly mattered, a way that could genuinely alleviate her larger struggles, to perhaps open a door for her that she might never have known existed. He would find a way, discreetly, effectively, to offer a helping hand that could change the trajectory of her life. The clinking of silverware and the low hum of conversation continued around them, but for Sarah, the world seemed to narrow to the small circle of their table. Her meal, though incredibly satisfying and unexpectedly delicious, was now a fading memory, replaced by the rising tide of a familiar anxiety. Tom, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her, was regaling her with an amusing anecdote about a client, his eyes sparkling with genuine amusement. Sarah forced a smile, nodding at the appropriate moments, but her mind was already elsewhere, meticulously replaying the earlier moments of the evening, trying desperately to recall if Tom had ordered anything excessively extravagant. She knew, with a sinking certainty, that her meager $3 would barely cover a fraction of the cost, even if she somehow managed to convince the waiter to only charge her for the small initial side dish she had ordered. The thought alone made her stomach churn. Her palms grew clammy under the table as she braced herself for the inevitable, internally calculating how best to navigate the impending financial embarrassment. Should she pretend she forgot her wallet? No, that was too obvious, too cliché. Perhaps she could offer to pay for her tiny portion, making a show of it, hoping Tom would then naturally take care of the rest. The scenarios played out in her mind like a rapid-fire sequence of increasingly humiliating possibilities. She felt a blush creeping up her neck, her heart thumping against her ribs. This wonderful evening, this rare moment of escape, was about to crash against the harsh rocks of her financial reality. Just as the last echoes of Tom's laughter faded, a polite cough signaled the waiter's return. He approached their table with a calm, professional demeanor, holding a sleek, leather-bound folder. Sarah's breath hitched. This was it, the moment of truth. She watched, her eyes wide with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity, as the waiter placed the folder gently between them. She couldn't bring herself to look at it directly, her gaze fixed instead on Tom's unsuspecting face. Tom, still basking in the glow of their pleasant conversation, reached for the folder, a casual gesture born of habit and expectation. He opened it, his expression one of mild amusement, ready to settle their bill. Sarah held her breath, preparing for the wave of shame that was sure to wash over her as soon as he saw the exorbitant total. But Tom's easy smile faltered. His brow furrowed slightly, then deepened into a look of genuine confusion. He turned the folder slightly, inspecting the contents more closely. Sarah's eyes darted to the folder, catching a glimpse of the stark, unsettling truth. The check, usually filled with itemized charges and a daunting total, was completely blank. Her own confusion mirrored Tom's. What was happening? Had the waiter made a mistake? Was this some elaborate prank? A nervous laugh bubbled up her throat, quickly stifled. The waiter, who had been observing their reactions with a subtle, knowing smile playing on his lips, finally spoke. His voice was soft, yet clear enough to cut through the restaurant's background chatter. "There's no need to worry about the bill, sir and madam," he said, his smile widening almost imperceptibly. "Your meal, in its entirety, has been taken care of this evening." Sarah's stunned silence was absolute. For a moment, the words simply hung in the air, refusing to penetrate her disoriented mind. Taken care of? What did that even mean? Tom, equally surprised but with an air of pleased acceptance, looked at the waiter. "Oh, really? By whom?" he asked, a polite curiosity in his tone. The waiter merely chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to say, sir. It was a gesture of anonymous generosity." Anonymous generosity. The phrase echoed in Sarah's mind, a sudden, jarring chord of recognition. The mysterious dish, the waiter's insistence, the subtle glances, it all clicked into place with dizzying speed. It wasn't the chef. It wasn't a mistake. Someone else, someone in this very restaurant, had witnessed her initial struggle, had seen her embarrassment, and had silently intervened. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of disbelief and a profound, overwhelming gratitude, instinctively began to scan the room. Her gaze swept over the other diners, lingering briefly on faces she didn't recognize, searching for any hint, any flicker of acknowledgement. And then, across the bustling room, almost hidden amongst the other patrons, her eyes met his. Michael was looking directly at her, his face a carefully neutral mask, but in his eyes, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth flickered. It lasted only a fraction of a second, a fleeting moment of connection that spoke volumes without a single word. He offered a barely perceptible nod, a silent, almost shy acknowledgement of his role in their unexpected fortune. It was a gesture so subtle, so understated, that anyone else in the room would have missed it entirely. But Sarah, whose senses were now heightened by the surreal turn of events, caught it. She saw him, recognized the silent benefactor, the kind stranger who had not only saved her from a deeply humiliating situation, but had also transformed an evening of anxiety into one of genuine delight. As quickly as their eyes met, Michael's gaze shifted. He turned his attention back to his own table, to the ongoing conversation with his business associates, effectively disappearing back into the background, maintaining his desired anonymity. He had made his presence known, affirmed her intuition, and then, just as swiftly, retreated, leaving Sarah with the profound weight of his quiet kindness. The revelation settled over her, a warm, comforting blanket against the residual chill of her earlier despair. She felt a sudden, inexplicable lightness, a wave of relief so intense it almost brought tears to her eyes. The evening, which had started with such trepidation and shame, was now ending on a note of pure, unexpected grace. The waiter approached their table, a subtle knowing smirk playing on his lips, holding the check presenter. Sarah's breath hitched. This was it, the moment of truth. Her heart pounded against her ribs, her earlier relief about the mysterious meal dissolving into a fresh wave of panic. She braced herself, mentally calculating the sum, preparing to offer her meager $3 with a flurry of apologies, fabricating some sudden, urgent need to leave. Tom, oblivious, reached for the black leather folder, but the waiter gently intercepted him, his smile widening. "There's no need, sir," the waiter announced, his voice carrying just enough to be heard over the restaurant's ambient hum. "Your meal has been taken care of." Sarah's eyes widened, her entire body freezing. The words hung in the air, echoing the earlier mystery of the unexpected dish. She looked at the waiter, then at Tom, whose brow furrowed in confusion before a slow, pleased grin spread across his face. "Really?" Tom exclaimed, genuinely surprised and delighted. "That's incredibly generous. Was it a promotion or—" The waiter simply shook his head, his gaze momentarily flicking towards Michael's table before returning to Sarah. "Just a gesture of goodwill, sir. Enjoy your evening." With a polite bow, he retreated, leaving Sarah and Tom in stunned silence. Sarah's mind raced. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had paid for their entire meal. Her eyes, almost instinctively, drifted across the opulent dining room, searching. Her gaze met Michael's for a fleeting, electric second. He was already looking at her, a gentle, almost imperceptible nod from his end. It was so subtle, so brief, that anyone else would have missed it. But Sarah saw it, felt it, a silent acknowledgement of his role in her extraordinary evening. Then, as quickly as it had come, his gaze shifted, and he turned back to his own table, deep in conversation with his associates, maintaining his anonymity perfectly. A profound warmth spread through Sarah, a sensation far more comforting than the exquisite meal she had just consumed. It wasn't just about the money or the embarrassment she had been spared. It was about the unexpected kindness, the anonymous generosity from a complete stranger who had seen her struggle and quietly, elegantly intervened. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a mixture of overwhelming gratitude and a deep, humbling sense of being cared for, if only for a few hours. She didn't confront Michael, didn't approach his table, respecting his unspoken desire for anonymity. She understood. Their connection, though silent and brief, was powerful precisely because it was unsought, unacknowledged, yet deeply felt. Leaving the restaurant with Tom, Sarah felt a newfound lightness in her step, a buoyancy she hadn't experienced in years. The city lights seemed to sparkle brighter, the air felt crisper, and the incessant hum of traffic seemed to fade into a distant melody. The experience had left an indelible mark on her soul, restoring her faith in the inherent goodness of people, in the possibility of unexpected grace in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. She walked beside Tom, their hands brushing occasionally, a soft smile gracing her lips. Her bond with Tom had indeed been strengthened, solidified not by lavish displays, but by a shared, unforgettable experience, an evening woven with threads of hidden kindness and genuine connection. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, even if he hadn't fully understood the depth of her struggle, and had responded with unwavering admiration. As they strolled through the city streets, Sarah reflected on the profound impact of that anonymous act. It wasn't just a free meal, it was a lesson, a powerful affirmation that true wealth wasn't solely measured in currency, but in compassion and empathy. Michael, the billionaire's son, had not just alleviated her immediate financial burden. He had offered her a glimpse into a world where kindness existed without expectation of reward, where privilege could be used as a force for quiet good. His actions resonated deeply, reminding her that humanity often revealed itself in the most unexpected ways, from the most unlikely sources. The encounter with Michael, however brief and silent, had instilled in her a renewed sense of possibility, a belief in a world where kindness could cut through class divides and where a stranger's empathy could ignite a flicker of hope. She felt a profound shift within her, a new perspective on her own struggles, knowing that even in her toughest moments, there was an unseen tapestry of interconnectedness, of human care that might just appear when she least expected it. This evening, born from anxiety and embarrassment, had transformed into a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the smallest gesture could ripple outwards, changing lives in ways unimaginable. This powerful story of Sarah's journey, from quiet despair to unexpected hope, serves as a poignant reminder that compassion can surface in the most surprising places. It encourages us all to look beyond the surface, to recognize the struggles others may hide, and to consider how a simple act of kindness, however small or anonymous, can illuminate someone's darkest hour. Share your own stories of unexpected generosity in the comments below. Let us know how an act of kindness has impacted your life. And remember to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next inspiring tale of human connection and surprising moments of grace. We're constantly seeking out stories that uplift, inspire, and remind us of the extraordinary power of empathy in our world. Join our community and let's keep these important conversations going, fostering a space where compassion truly thrives.